Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at Noon, the trial for the captain and crew members of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry begins later today. The main focus is on whether the court will uphold the murder charge against the captain. A Japanese government document from 1962 shows Tokyo concluded back then its claim over the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island would never stand up at the International Court of Justice. Plus, with only 3 days remaining before the 2014 World Cup kicks off, a 5-day subway strike underlines the grim mood in the host nation, Brazil. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
It's noon Tuesday, June 10th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime. The trial begins this Tuesday afternoon, in a couple of hours, in fact, for the captain and other crew members of the Sewol-ho ferry that sank in April, killing hundreds of passengers.
The captain and 3 other members of the crew are facing charges of murder by willful negligence. Connie Kim has the story.
The 15 crew members of the ill-fated Sewol-ho ferry will go on trial this Tuesday for fleeing the sinking ship, leaving behind hundreds of passengers. Sewol-ho Captain Lee Joon-seok and 3 other senior crew members are charged with murder by willful negligence. The rest are charged with negligence that led to the death of hundreds of people. The crew, who were among the first to get off the ferry, were accused of making no attempt to rescue passengers. With most of the crew members partially admitting to negligence, the focus of the trial will be whether the 4 senior crew members will be found guilty of murder. On this first day of the trial at the Gwangju District Court, prosecutors and the defense lawyers will lay out their respective cases and apply for evidence to be submitted.
If the murder out of willful negligence is to be upheld, the causal relationship must be proved that passengers died because the crew members did not rescue them, although they were aware of the dangers of death the passengers faced.
The prosecution says they have secured video footage and communication logs between the ferry and the vessel control tower as evidence to back their charges. Of the 15 defendants, only 1 has managed to find a private attorney for defense. The others will be defended by government-arranged lawyers. The trial will be relayed to another courtroom through video streaming for relatives and others who could not make it to the courtroom. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, with regards to the suspected owner of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry, President Park Geun-hye says she doesn't understand why it's taking so long for authorities to arrest him. At a cabinet meeting Tuesday, the president urged the prosecution and police to review their means to arrest Yoo Byung-eun and to seek other ways of locating the fugitive. Humbly accepting the outcome of last week's local elections, the president said the government should do its best to eliminate ill practices in society to make Korea a safer place to live. She added that a focus should now also be directed towards reviving the economy by encouraging consumers to start spending again. The Sewol-ho ferry disaster is being blamed on a number of things, one of which is the practice of collusive ties between the government and the industries they're meant to regulate. And while changes have been promised, there's a lot of work to be done. Kim Young-gil explains.
Retired bureaucrats in Korea have long enjoyed the luxury of finding employment in firms and organizations that have direct links to their former posts. President Park Geun-hye's first choice for new Prime Minister An Dae-hee ran into trouble for that very reason, withdrawing his nomination last month after it was revealed he had made hundreds of thousands of dollars last year as a lawyer after retiring as a former Supreme Court justice. President Park Geun-hye has vowed to end the era of cozy ties between bureaucrats and the industries and companies they regulate and has pledged reforms. But the changes are not coming easily. Take, for instance, the current Public Service Ethics Act, which states that the government's Public Ethics Committee must screen any high-ranking government official that seeks employment at a company or public institution. A revised version of the act that was introduced in 2011 but remains unpassed that the National Assembly would exempt lawyers, certified public accountants, and tax accountants from the screening process. Lawmakers of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy on the Parliamentary Public Administration Committee say they have been trying to have the clause removed, only to be met with resistance from related interest groups. Although President Park had vocalized a strong will to end the close ties between the government and the industries they are meant to oversee, the legislation that would impose greater restrictions on the practices remains in limbo. Only when those measures are introduced will government officials be restricted from taking jobs at state-funded institutions that manage business licensing or carry out audits of companies where mutual interests may be at stake. 김영길, Arirang News.
13 days after her previous prime minister nominee An Dae-hee withdrew amid controversy over his post-retirement earnings, President Park hasn't yet named her next choice. While the presidential office has tightened the personal verification process, many members within the ruling party are saying President Park should also consider a figure from the opposition side so long as he or she shares the president's governing philosophy and values. In fact, figures who held key posts in the former liberal governments of Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, including former head of Fair Trade Commission Kang Cheol-gyu and former presidential secretary Kim Byung-jun, are reported to have been considered. President Park is widely expected to make the announcement sometime this week. And moving on, new evidence has emerged that shows the Japanese government acknowledged decades ago that its claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island were not worth taking to the International Court of Justice as it is pushing to do now. Despite this, the current Abe administration in Japan continues to threaten to take the case to The Hague. Our Yudian has the details.
A secret government report dating back to 1962 shows Japan knew back then that its claim to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island was not a case that could be brought to the International Court of Justice. In the report recently released by a civic group in Japan, Tokyo's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the Dokdo issue cannot be categorized as an international dispute, as it arose before Japan announced its compulsory jurisdiction over the island in 1958. The document added that territorial disputes only apply between countries that claim compulsory jurisdiction, but since Korea did not, it said the Dokdo issue cannot be deemed a territorial dispute. The transcript of a closed-door meeting between the then director of the Central Intelligence Agency of Korea, Kim Jong-pil, and former Japanese Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda in 1952 has also been made public. Ikeda told Kim that the issue should be left alone since Korea is effectively in control of Dokdo Island.
This document proves Japan is making its claim while it knew from the very beginning that it was completely unjust.
The civic group wants to bring lawsuits against the Japanese government to make public documents related to bilateral talks between Korea and Japan to bring light to historical facts. Yurian, Arirang News.
An attorney representing an American who was recently detained in North Korea says his client was on vacation in the country and was not there for religious purposes. Jeffrey Fowle was reportedly arrested in the North last month for leaving a Bible in his hotel room. In a short statement Monday, Mr. Fowle's attorney said his client loves to travel and that his family is extremely anxious for him to come home. It also said Fowle's family thanks the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang for its ongoing efforts to secure his release. With Mr. Fowle now in custody, there are now 3 US citizens being held in North Korea. South Korea exported $14 billion worth of products related to information and communications technology in May. That's a 7.5% decrease compared to the same period last year. Trade officials attribute the decline to there being fewer business days this past May and point out that the daily average of shipments was relatively consistent with the figures from last year. Exports of display panels, mobile handsets and semiconductors to major trade partners like China and the US edged down. It's the first time in 14 months that ICT exports to China have decreased. However, exports to the EU and Taiwan were up, with an import volume of $6.8 billion, and the surplus in the ICT sector last month was $7.2 billion. Now it appears the poor are getting poorer in Korea. The gap between the middle class and the poor has widened to nearly double the size it was 20 years ago. Statistics Korea said Tuesday that the nation's so-called relative poverty rate of households in Korean cities, and this is households with more than 2 people, stood at 14.5% last year. That means that more than 1 out of every 10 city households earns less than half of what middle-income households earn each year. In 1993, the rate stood at around 8%. It peaked at 10% during the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s and the global financial crisis that started in 2008. The Asia-Pacific region is expected to overtake Western Europe and North America in terms of private wealth by the end of 2018. Boston Consulting Group's annual report, Global Wealth 2014, shows the Asia-Pacific region, which excludes Japan, is expected to outstrip Western Europe within this year. The report classifies private wealth as cash, deposits and securities, but excludes real estate. The report also expects the Asia-Pacific region will record an average annual growth rate of more than 10% by 2018. Last year, the amount of financial wealth held by Asia-Pacific region reached around $37 trillion. That's up by some 30% compared to the previous year. Globally, the amount of private wealth recorded $152 trillion. That's up nearly 15% from the previous year, and this thanks to favourable conditions in the global security market. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this afternoon. For that, we're going to connect live to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news centre.
Eunice, operations at Jinnah International Airport in Karachi have resumed, but Pakistan's Taliban are speaking of more attacks in the future.
That's right, Jinju. Security remains tight in Pakistan 1 day after that airport attack turned shootout that killed at least 30 people in the country's largest city. And what we're learning now is that a Taliban spokesman told the Associated Press such attacks will continue until there is a permanent ceasefire. Pakistan's Interior Minister warned every area is a threat, every building is a potential target. This as authorities continue to scour Jinnah International Airport in Karachi 1 day after that 5-hour shootout that killed all 10 gunmen who stormed the major airport prepared, wearing suicide vests and carrying machine guns, grenades, and a rocket launcher. The assault began around midnight Sunday night local time and continued into early morning, developing into a face-off with security personnel. The Pakistani Taliban had officially claimed responsibility, marking it their largest strike on a state security complex. They say it was in revenge for the death of a former Taliban leader by a U.S. drone strike last November. Tehran has expressed that it could extend nuclear talks with the West should they fail to come to an agreement by the July 20th deadline. High-level officials from Iran and the U.S. met face-to-face in Geneva Monday for the first time in decades to break the deadlock that had each side accusing the other of unrealistic demands. On the sidelines, Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Iranian media that while it's too early to decide on an extension, should it come to that, Iran would have no choice but to extend the Geneva deal for 6 more months while negotiations continue. He also called the talks positive and constructive. They resume in a couple hours on Tuesday morning, local time. Iraq continues to be beset with violence. Monday's series of strikes in the country took at least 40 lives, the worst of which targeted Kurdish political party offices in northern Iraq. 22 people died in the double bombings, according to authorities, when 2 truck bombs were detonated one after the other, dealing a blow against bystanders who rushed in following the first explosion. No one has so far claimed responsibility for Monday's attacks, but an al-Qaeda splinter group, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, said they were behind the double bombings on Sunday against Kurdish offices, which killed 19 people. And finally, the world's certified oldest man has passed away at the age of 111. Friends and family said Alexander Imich died Sunday in his Upper West Side apartment in New York City. The Polish native and Soviet Gulag survivors escaped to the U.S. with his wife during his 40s. He was a chemist and a scholar of the paranormal and had edited an anthology at 93 years of age. Imich was one of 76 super centenarians worldwide, people who live beyond 110 years, of which only 3 were men.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju. Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about... Now to some rather depressing sports news if you're a fan of South Korea, because the South Korean squad have completed their warm-up schedule for the World Cup in extremely disappointing fashion, losing 4-0 to Ghana in Miami. Terrible defending and goalkeeping by Korea in the 11th minute saw Jordan Ayew's deflected shot find its way into the back of the net there. Looking in complete control the whole game, Ghana's captain Asamoah Gyan scored the second in the 43rd minute. Ayew scored his second in the 55th minute and got his hat-trick just before the final whistle. This was Korea's last warm-up match before the World Cup in Brazil. Korea's first World Cup game against Russia kicks off at 7 a.m. Korea time on Wednesday, June 18th. Now, in Brazil, with just 3 days remaining before the World Cup, mass protests and strikes are rocking the host nation. Public workers have stormed off the job, and citizens have been protesting about the vast sums, huge sums of money, public money as well, spent on the tournament. Meanwhile, there has been a 5-day strike happening with metro workers, but it has been called off for now, but it seems it could continue at any moment. Connie Lee has this report.
In Brazil's biggest city of Sao Paulo, metro workers entered their 5th day of protest on Monday, even after a court ruled their strike illegal. Riot police armed with tear gas had to confront the striking workers, who have reduced their demands to a 12% pay raise, lower than the previous 35%. Major subway lines have been closed since last Thursday, causing chaos, traffic jams, and uncertainty just days before the World Cup.
I think it's wrong. This shows how Brazil is. We do not have organization. We don't have anything, no patience. This is a country that will host the World Cup. Congratulations.
The city's mayor says officials are making every effort to end the strike.
We are seeking the solution not just for the upcoming big event, but as a right of the workers of Sao Paulo to have a judicial decision fulfilled so that normalcy can return to the city.
Leading up to the World Cup, the metro strike is just the latest in a string of protests by public workers. In Rio de Janeiro, outside a World Cup media center, teachers protested and rallied. Using the backdrop of international attention and the tens of billions of dollars spent by Brazil's government on the tournament, public workers have been demanding large pay raises. Thousands of other city employees, including police and bus drivers in different host cities, have also gone on strike in the weeks leading up to the World Cup. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korean singer Psy is back, and has he done it again? Gangnam Style took the world by storm 2 summers ago, and his latest track, Hangover, has burst out of the gate since being released this week. Shin Se-min reports.
14 million viewers and counting. In less than 1 day, Psy's new music video, Hangover, has certainly garnered interest on YouTube. It features Psy and American hip-hop artist Snoop Dogg delving into Korea's unique drinking culture and shows them visiting a singing room, drinking hangover remedies, visiting a sauna, and of course, downing soju and beer. Any success with this video will be judged against the one that broke Psy out as an international star in 2012. Since it was released, Gangnam Style has racked up over 2 billion views on YouTube, earning the title as the most watched clip of all time on the video sharing site. According to the British magazine The Economist, the time spent by all of us watching that video could have been used for other pursuits. The time spent watching the 4-minute 12-second video over 2 billion times equals 140 million hours or 16,000 years. Had Gangnam Style viewers not been watching the video, The Economist says they could have constructed 20 Empire State Buildings or built 3 ships. Will we be talking about Hangover in the same way in a few years? Only time will tell, but Psy isn't resting on his laurels. He will release another single called Daddy this summer. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Violinist Chung Kyung-hwa is one of Korea's musical legends, and our very own Park Ji-won was lucky enough to have a chat with her about her 5 decades in the classical music business.
Korean classical music legend Chung Kyung-hwa, who has been leading a successful career spanning nearly 50 years, recalls her first encounter with the violin.
What I loved about the violin when I started, when I was 6, was the freedom. I felt that the instrument was very intimate, and it also presented a voice. And so from then on, it became very pure fascination for me.
Since winning the Leventree competition in 1967 at the age of 19, she has become one of the world's first Asian classical musicians to reach star status on the global stage. She also shared part of her music career in the Chung Trio, along with her sister cellist Chung Myung-hwa and brother maestro conductor Chung Myung-hoon.
I had a very, very busy career until I had 2 children. I was very lucky to have this active career as a young performer.
She's been hailed by fans and music critics alike for her passionate yet delicate playing that could resonate with almost any period of classical music, from Bach and Beethoven to modern composers like Stravinsky. She says her Guarnerius violin, which she acquired in 1983, is her voice.
This instrument is so human. Once I've been in touch with Guarnerius, there is nothing that comes closer to my soul than this instrument.
In 2005, she suffered a finger injury. Thinking her violin playing days were over, she began teaching at Juilliard and co-directing the Great Mountains Music Festival. By 2010, her finger healed, allowing her to fully return to playing on international stages and in charity concerts, such as the one she will perform at the Seoul Arts Center this Friday.
I started as a dream of having a big solo career, but it's not a single voice I am looking for now. It is harmonious voice. Unless we care for each other and find the voice of each other and tune it together, we will not find the harmony.
In addition to her China tour in October, Chung will also play at the Royal Festival Hall in London on December 2nd, on the stage where her international career took off. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
A partly to mostly sunny day is ahead, with a chance of showers returning to the forecast late this afternoon into tomorrow. The showers will begin in the northern regions, then gradually spread to other areas. And we're expecting 5 to 40 millimeters of rainfall across the nation, so please close your window before heading out today. And most parts of the peninsula will have cooler readings, with highs hovering in the low to mid mid-20s. In fact, temperatures will stay in the mid-20s here in Seoul due to the on and off rain this week, and that rain could be accompanied by thunder and lightning. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 27, while Daegu tops out at 24, and Busan should climb to 22. Now for other regions, down on Jeju should see a high of 23, and Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 28 and 19. That's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon, for the weather there. And those are the stories we are following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.